Hello everyone, welcome to this session on Introduction to Google Cloud Fundamentals, and we are going to understand the core infrastructure today. I welcome you all to this session. Now, before we begin with the session, guys, we have some people on YouTube and we have some people on webinar. So, people on webinar, you're free to ask me any kind of question that you want, and I'd be happy to answer all your queries. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and start with this session by moving on to the agenda. So, guys, first of all, we are going to move on and talk about what is cloud exactly, and then move on to discuss. We are basically going to talk about what is Google Cloud, right? Then we're going to talk about the Cloud core infrastructure. So, guys, this is the agenda for this session. I hope it's clear to you. Now, let's move on, and first, let's talk about what is cloud computing. Okay, and I'm going to take a very small example also, which is going to make this understanding more clear to you. So, guys, when you talk about cloud computing, it is nothing but renting servers on the internet. Now, what does that mean? That means that instead of buying servers, let's say if you're a company, instead of you buying servers, you can rent servers from companies at a very cheap price, right? And that is exactly what cloud computing is. And there are a lot of companies which basically work on this business model, and we're going to talk about them in a little while. And Google Cloud is basically one of them. All right. Now let's understand it using a scenario, right? So let's say you're a guy, you're a developer, and what you do is tomorrow, let's say you want to start off your own company. And for that, what you do is you basically build an application. It could be a music streaming application, it could be a video streaming application, it could be anything for that matter. So you have built your application now, and now what you want to do is you want to deploy it on the internet so that the other people who are out there can use it. Why on the internet? Why not on your laptop and let people obviously, if there are 1,000 people who are using that application at any point in time, your laptop will not be able to take that kind of load. So what do? You basically deploy it on a bigger machine, which has a better CPU and a better RAM. And that machine is nothing but a server. So you deploy it on a server or multiple servers, right? And then that application is made available to the internet. And through that, your application is made available to the users. Okay. Now, the problem over here is sometimes you might not have that kind of investment to buy all these servers, right? Or let's talk about in a different sense. Let's talk about then why Netflix is using a cloud platform, or why even MNCs are using cloud platforms. So the simple reason for that is not only are you renting servers from the cloud provider, right? You're also removing away the hassle of any hardware failures, any power backup failure, any internet failure. Everything is now going to be managed by the cloud provider, and you just sit back, relax, and just work on your application. Right? Not only does it make your team size small because now you do not need hardware engineers or server managers, but at the same time, you at the back of your mind will not be worrying about is my internet going to go out or not, or is my application available to all the people or not. Why? Because you have opted for a cloud provider and it's their responsibility to manage all your servers. Okay. And to because of all these reasons, cloud computing is preferred, and it was first launched by a company called Amazon. And the reason they launched it was because they had a very big server fleet, because they were going to be the most used e-commerce application in the world. And even at that time they had a pretty big user base to basically cater. Now, what they noticed was most of the times the server fleet that they have bought, it went unused because sometimes it was used at its maximum potential, but at the other times people were not that active on the e-commerce application, and hence, it was not that much used. So what they did was they started renting out their infrastructure to other companies who probably want to use it. So that's how the cloud model came into place, and that's how successful it has become since then. Now, every company you go to, if it has an IT product, chances are it is hosted on the cloud. Okay, and 95% chances are they're hosted on the cloud. If you talk about MNCs, if you talk about banks, In their case, they might have a hybrid network, but most of the smaller companies, most of the startups, they're all on a cloud provider. Now, having said that, what are the advantages? So, first of all, there's little or no investment required to get started. Second thing is because there is no worries about the hardware, so you can focus more on the app development. And third thing is it requires less workforce because now you don't have to hire people to manage your servers. It is now being managed by the company that from where you basically hired or rented the servers. Okay, now some of the cloud products that you might be using every day. So as you all know, Google Drive is basically a very popular service which gives you Google Doc, it gives you Google Sheets, and a lot more other products. It's all hosted on the cloud. Netflix services, if any of you is using the Netflix service, it's all hosted on the cloud. Airbnb, the e-commerce company giant, which is Amazon, and even its video platform, which is Prime Video. Everything is hosted on the cloud. They don't have private servers. They are hosting everything on the cloud, and they are basically paying on a pay-as-you-go basis. Okay. So these are some popular products that you're using, but there might be some some apps which are there in your specific country that you might be using, or in your specific region that you might be using, which is also hosted on the cloud, but you never realize it. Okay. Now talking about the cloud paradigm, we discussed that cloud, what is basically the cloud concept, and what are the different kind of products that we might be using which are out there, which are basically hosted on the cloud. Now, there are a lot of cloud providers to choose from. There is Amazon Web Services, there is Microsoft Azure. Today, in this session, we will be talking about Google Cloud Platform. So, what is Google Cloud Platform? It's basically a cloud provider which runs on the same infrastructure. Now, this is very important thing to understand, and it's very cool as well that it runs on the same infrastructure. So, the servers that are given to public, which they can use for their application, it's the same infrastructure which Google uses for Google Search, Gmail, and YouTube, which are the most used products of the Google or the Alphabet company. Right? Google Search, every second there are a million or more number of searches which happens on Google, right? And think about the kind of hardware that they require for this kind of an implementation, right? So that is also hosted on the Google Cloud Platform. If you talk about Gmail, which I'm pretty sure every one of you might have used in some part or at some point in your life, is also hosted on the Google Cloud Platform, right? Similarly, YouTube, which is the most used video streaming platform, is also hosted on Google Cloud Platform. Now, given the fact that if these services are running fine without any failures on Google Cloud Platform, you can be rest assured that even your applications are in the safe hand when you're running it on GCP, right? And a very general example to give you over here is when we want to check whether we are connected to the internet or not, what do? We type in google.com, right? Why? Because we know that our internet can be out, right? But we know that google.com will never be down, right? And that is the kind of reliability that you automatically get on a company like Google, that, how can their products fail? And on the same lines, when you talk about the infrastructure that they're using, they've now made it publicly available, and the product is called Google Cloud Platform. So it comes with that trust. Okay. Now, why do people use Google Cloud Platform? So first of all, it's cost effective. Why? Because they charge you on a basis of per minute or a per second basis as well, right? So some cloud providers which are out there, they also charge you on per hour basis. So let's say you use your service for 20 minutes, you will have to pay for the whole hour, right? But with Google Cloud Platform, it's more precise. It's to the minute or to the seconds pricing. So the bill that you get is very precise. And in the same sense, even the products which are offered by Google Cloud Platform are very competitive in nature when it comes to pricing. Obviously, the quality is at par with the other cloud providers, but the pricing is also very competitive, and hence Google Cloud is one of the most cost-effective cloud platforms. Right? It is highly scalable. Now, this is the same reason that other cloud providers are also chosen, because you have an unlimited number of resources when it comes down to deploying servers in the cloud provider. Your application can also be scaled by making or exploiting the infrastructure that you have beneath your application, right? There are custom machine types, which basically means that if you want a 6 GB server, you can get that. If you want a 12 GB server, you can get that. So there are custom machine types that you can deploy on a cloud provider, and that is also true for Google Cloud Platform. It is very good at managing Internet of Things application. It is very good at managing the API ecosystem. It is very good for big data analytics. So I think out of all the cloud providers, Google Cloud is the best for big data workloads, right? It also has given us a lot of machine learning and AI services, which are again very good to use and are basically best in the market. And similarly, it offers us a lot of serverless applications as well. I mean, the future of application development is going to be serverless. If you don't know what serverless is, I will explain it to you in a little while. But the future of development is going to be serverless. So right now, what people do is they basically rent a server, they deploy their application on there, and then that's how they work. But in the future, there will be no servers. It will just be your code which you deploy on the cloud platform, and the cloud platform will decide which machine it has to be deployed on. You will not have to deal with the operating systems directly in the coming future, and that is exactly what serverless services are. And every platform offers it, and Google also is not far behind. It offers best-in-class serverless services as well. Okay. Now we'll be talking about the core infrastructure, but before we move forward, guys, if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer now. Any questions you guys have before we move along? Before we talk about the core infrastructure, any kind of questions you have over here? Any questions, guys? Okay, how about telling me whether I'm audible or not? Let me see if you guys can talk. Okay, Amit says serverless. So Amit, I'll be explaining it to you in a little while. What are serverless services? Viren says it's perfect. Ravi says serverless is future. Yes, Ravi. Others, guys, let's be interactive. Let's make use of this session as much as possible. Any kind of questions? Gospel says serverless is not clear yet. Yes, Gospel, I'll be explaining you. Paul says, can hear you. Good so far. Great, great. All right, guys. So thank you for the confirmation. Now let's move forward and let's talk about what are the core infrastructure services of Google Cloud, right? And when I'm going through the services, I'll also explain you what are serverless services. Okay. So let's talk about the core infrastructure. So guys, the core infrastructure of any cloud provider is basically the infrastructure which is most used and is essential for any kind of application that you want to deploy on a cloud provider, right? So you have something called as compute engine, you have something called as storage engine, and then you have something called as the network engine in Google Cloud Platform. Okay, now in these engines, you have multiple services that you can make use of, but the three domains or the three engines of Google Cloud that we're going to talk about today is compute, storage, and networking. Okay, now let's jump on to the Cloud Console directly, and let me explain you there as to what are the different kind of services or infrastructure services that are basically offered by GCP for us to use. Okay, just give me a moment. All right. So guys, this is how your GCP console looks like when you basically sign up on it, right? So what you have to do is just go to cloud.google.com, right? And if you already have a Google account, you will be signed in. What you'll have to do is you'll have to click on console, right? So once you click on console, it will say that you're not signed up for Google Cloud. You have to sign up there, and all the details are just like signing up on any email service. In the end, it will ask you for a credit card number. You enter that, it will deduct $1 if you're outside India, and if you're in India, it'll charge you ₹2. And once the transaction is successful, this will be reversed back to your account, right? So this is just for verifying that the credit card works or not. And once you sign up on Google Cloud, what you get is you get a credit worth of 13,000 rupees, or let's say $200 worth of Google Cloud credits. And what you can do with those Google Cloud credits is you can launch services on Google Cloud, right? And you can try out them, you can understand how they work, and you will not be charged anything, right? So until and unless you exhaust those credits, nothing will be charged to you, and you can make use of those services for your personal use and understanding. Okay, so that's what Google Cloud gives us when you sign up for the first time. A couple of information over here, which is good to know, that Google Cloud is having its servers in more than 200 plus countries, right? And if you talk about services, these are the different kind of services that it offers. But today, like I said, we will be focusing on only the domains of compute, storage, and network. So let's understand what these services are. Okay, so first thing that you do is you click on this navigation menu, and then you get a list of all the services that Google Cloud is basically giving you. Okay, so this is the set of compute services that Google Cloud has. So you have App Engine, Compute Engine, Kubernetes Engine, Cloud Functions, Cloud Run, VMware Engine, and I'll be talking about each one of these in a little while. Then in storage, you have all these services. You have Bigtable, Data Store, Firestore, File Store, Storage, SQL Spanner, Memory Store, Data Transfer. And then in networking, you have VPC network, network services, hybrid connectivity, network service tiers, network security, and network intelligence. Okay, so let's go about these services one by one. So let's start with the most popular service, which is going to be services which are going to be there on Google Cloud, which is the compute services. Okay, so in compute services, there are two kinds of services over here. The first kind of service is called infrastructure as a service, and the second kind of service is called platform as a service. And these different types are also going to answer your question of what are serverless services. Okay, so let's talk about compute engine first. So guys, compute engine is just like having a server, right? And this server is now on cloud. So it's just like having a computer which is deployed on cloud, but you cannot see it. So that's why it's called the compute engine. And in compute engine, you can deploy virtual machines. So let me show you what virtual machines are. So once you reach here, so just click on the virtual machines section. So you have VM instances over here. So what you can do with VM instances is you can launch a server with the help of VM instances. Now let me show you how you can deploy a server. So the first thing that you do is just click on create. And once you click on create, what happens is you get this kind of a dashboard. Now you will understand over here exactly how cloud computing is so powerful. Okay, so let's name your computer something. Let's name your server something. Let's name it, let's say, Intellipaat -1. Okay, this is the name that I'm giving to your computer. Next, you choose the country that you want to deploy it in. So you have so these are basically regions which are based in different countries, but you get the idea, right? So for example, if you want to deploy in the Asia Pacific region, these are the different regions that you can deploy it in. Similarly, if you want to deploy your servers in the Europe region, then you have all these different locations that you can deploy your servers in. So why do you have so many locations? It's because let's say if you talk about Intellipaat, so we have a customer base in US, and in other major parts of the world as well, right? And we have a user base in India too. So what happens is if I launch servers in India, obviously the response time for the Indian users would be more, or would be the least when you compare it with US users if they are pinging the same server, reason being the distance. So what happens is when you talk about a global service, for example, when you talk about Google.com, or let's say when you talk about a service like Netflix, which I'm pretty sure most of you must have used some point in time. So these services are basically used by a global audience, and that's why they are expected to deploy it in multiple regions as well to cater to different kind of audience that they have. So people who are accessing it from India will obviously be connected to the Indian servers. People who are connecting from US, they will be connected to the US servers because they want to give their best service to their customers, right? And in their best uh, experience, or in the best experience that they want to share with you, also comes with the fact that they have to give you the least response time for the service to work, right? And that is why these companies deploy it in multiple regions. So again, you can choose whichever region you want to deploy it in. Let's say we deploy it in Las Vegas, so we just choose that, right? Then comes which machine, what kind of machine that do you want to deploy it in, right? So when you talk about the series, so series basically tells you, uh, let's for example, if you're choosing N1, so this is the first generation of servers that they had, which is basically powered by Intel Skylake CPU platform, right? Now they have a second generation as well, which is E2. But when it comes down to the series, basically the newer servers, they're not uh, that much available as the earlier servers, right? So that's why they say that the recommended choice is N1 because there is abundance of servers when it comes down to the N1 type of servers. The E2 type of servers, on the other hand, since they're very new, it is not deployed that much on the infrastructure yet. So you can choose whichever you want. So we'll go with the default, which is N1. Now you can also choose the kind of RAM and the number of cores of CPU that you want, right? So let's say you want to go ahead with a 614 MB of memory and you want just one core of CPU. You have an option of that as well, and it goes all up to 360 GB of RAM as well. So this is what one server that you are deploying can have, right? At the click of a button. That's how soon you can get it, right? Similarly, if you want even a higher memory, you have 624 GB, systems as well. And if you want higher CPUs but not that much RAM, even that is available as an option too, right? So it's all up to you how you want to deploy it. Let's say we go with a 2-core CPU and an 8 GB RAM, right? This is the kind of server that I want. The next thing that it will ask me is which operating system do you want to launch, right? So I can say that you know what I want. Let's see what all options do we have, right? So you have Debian operating systems, then you have Red Hat operating systems, you have SUSE operating systems, you also have Windows operating systems which have a pre-installed SQL server installed on it, right? Then you have CentOS as well, you have Ubuntu as well, or if you want a plain Windows server, even that is available as an option. So let's say if you want to deploy Ubuntu, let's deploy this, and the standard, so this is the hard drive that the amount of hard drive that you need. So let's say we want around 100 GB of space in a hard drive. Okay, so this is what we choose. So now that I've chosen the Ubuntu operating system, now what I can also choose is the version of Ubuntu that I want to launch. right? For example, after 16 came 18, then came 20, 19, then came 20 as well. So whichever one that I'm comfortable with, whichever one my application is going to support, I can deploy that too. So let's say I choose the 18.04 version of Ubuntu. Okay, so I'm just going to click on select. So now that I have configured my operating system, I have configured, the number of CPU, the number of memory, the amount of memory that I need. Uh, I can just click on create. Rest everything can be left at default. I can just hit on create, and now my server will be created for me. And just notice the amount of time it is going to take to basically deploy the server. Okay, so starting now, I think this server should be deployed in a matter of seconds. And as you can see, the server is already deployed now. So now I have a server. So this green tick basically symbolizes that the instance is running. Now I have a server which is running the amount of RAM that I specified, which is running the amount of core CPUs that I specified, and it is running the operating system that I want, and it's now ready to use. Right. So all I have to do is I have to copy this IP address, and I can actually go ahead and run it from here. Right, it's all ready to use. So in order to connect to it, now what you have to do is you can go ahead and do a remote access to this using the SSH profile. So if you click on SSH, you have this option of either connecting it using a browser window, using SSH key, or any other thing. So the simplest method is using the browser window. So what it is going to do is it's going to SSH into your virtual machine, and you do not need any client for it. It will directly do it using the browser, which is awesome. You can also configure it to connect to it using any other client as well. But I think this is the best way to connect to it. So as you can see, I've connected to my server now, and I can use the Linux commands over here. I can also make it a little bigger for all of you to see, right? So I can run all the commands that I would normally run on an Ubuntu server. For example, if I want to update this machine, so I just type in sudo apt-get update, and this machine is now getting updated. So now let me make it, let me take it a notch up. What I'm going to do is let me deploy a web server over here, right? And then let's see if you guys can access it from your end. So let me make it a little smaller for everybody to see. Okay. And now what I can do is I can also, let me go ahead and install a web server on it. So this will basically now install a web server on this machine. So while this is happening, let me see if you have any questions. Okay. Murthy is saying, can you touch base on various cloud comparisons? Murthy, okay, I can do that. Okay, Christian is saying how to calculate infra cost. So when you launch a server, Christian, what happens is the machine that you choose has a pricing attached to it, right? For example, let's say this is what we launched. We launched N1 standard -2. So you can just copy this machine type, go to the browser, type in pricing, and this is the pricing for this kind of machine. So we launched it with 2 virtual cores, right? So it's $0.14 an hour, right? So this is the pricing that you are getting on this machine type. So there's also something called as a GCP price calculator. So with this, what you can do is you can put in your whole architecture that you're going to deploy on cloud, right? And this will give you an approximate cost, what it's going to cost you probably over a month, right? So this is how your cloud, so your calculator basically looks like. So you can feed in all these values and basically it'll give you, the output. So Murthy is saying like AWS versus cloud, Google Cloud and why. So Murthy, probably at the end of the session, I'll pick it up because, okay, Paul is saying if I have a bit of a lag between video and audio. So sorry, Paul, but if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer if something is not clear. Okay, Amit is saying, what does instance mean? So Amit, what we have done is we basically have just launched a server. So this is an instance. An instance can be called a server. A server can be called a computer. An instance can also be called a virtual machine. So all these are interchangeable terms that I'm using, right? So let's stick to a server. So what I've deployed right now is an Ubuntu server, right? And this Ubuntu server is deployed on Google Cloud. On the dashboard, what you see it basically being called is an instance, right? And there's a technical it's a technical term, instance, and why it's called an instance is because it's a part of a larger hardware, right? So whenever you deploy, so let's say this is the machine that I've deployed, right? So it has 2-core CPU and it has 8 GB of RAM. So this infrastructure is not a single computer in Google Cloud Platform. It's basically probably a very big server, but in that big server, they have virtualized a machine for me, which has 8 GB of RAM and it has 2 core of CPU. And since it has come from a larger server, it's called an instance, right? So that's the reason behind calling it an instance. But when you talk about the fact that what it is to us, it is for us, it's a server, right? For us, it's a place where I'm going to deploy my software and then I'll be able to use it, right? So what I've done right now is I have basically installed the Apache software on it. And now if basically we go ahead and if we try to access it using the IP address, we should be able to access this service over the browser. So one small thing that I'll have to do is I'll have to allow HTTP traffic. And with this, we should be able to access the website on the browser. So while this is happening, let me go to VM instances. And this is the instance that we have. Let me copy the IP address. And let me give it to you guys. So you can find this IP address in the chat. And if you try to put this IP address on the browser right now, you should be able to see this web page. So what we have done right now is we have basically deployed this web page on this server, right? And this server can now be accessed by anyone who is there on the internet on this particular IP address. Okay. So Paul Sheehan says F1 means free tier. No, Paul. So F1, so it's N1 actually, if I'm not wrong. 1 second. So it's basically a name that they have given to their server. So it's N1, right? It's basically a machine, code that they've given to their server. So there's no logic behind why it's called N1. Okay. Ajay is saying, what's the advantage of having a bigger boot storage? So Ajay, when you do that, you basically, let's say if you have a lot of softwares which, run when your operating system is started. So when you have a bigger boot storage, then in that case, not only those softwares can be installed easily, but at the same time, they can be executed easily as well because your system in that case does not have to go to a separate disk. So Ravi is saying, do we have the time limit for the credit that we get? The time limit is 1 year, if I'm not wrong, Ravi. So these $200 or 13,000 rupees are going to be valid for 1 whole year. Christian is saying, is the instance ready for high availability or redundancy? Not yet, Christian. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to enable auto scaling on this to basically make it highly available. So in that case, what will happen is, as and when the traffic is going to increase on the server, the as and when the CPU percentage is going to cross a specific limit, it's basically going to go ahead and deploy more servers, so the traffic can be distributed equally on it. So guys, this was a server that I have used, right? Now let's talk about the other services that you have in Compute Engine. And then from there, let's get the idea of what a serverless service is. Okay. All right. So you understood what Compute Engine is, right? Now let's talk about App Engine. So App Engine is, again, it's just like you renting a server, but in this case you do not get access to an SSH terminal like I just did. You do not get access to an operating system. So let me show you how App Engine basically looks like. So this is an App Engine dashboard. Now here, what you can do is you can again deploy apps if you want. So let's see how App Engine basically helps us. So you can start off by specifying a region where you want your server to be deployed, right? So let's say we want it to be deployed in Asia, but in South. Okay, let's do that. Let's click on Create App. Now it's asking us what kind of language is your website going to use that you are going to deploy on this. So you have a lot of options to choose from. Let's say it's going to be Python, the default. And the environment, do you want it to be standard, or do you want it to be flexible, which means that you can upscale or downscale according to traffic. So let's say it's standard. Let's click on next. And now what is going to happen is my app or my app engine is basically getting created. Now you will notice a very stark difference between what we just did here and when we compare it with what we did on VM instances. So let's go to dashboard. So it says that your app engine application has been created. Great. So what you can do is let's first go ahead and go to Python. So here I'm going to show you how you can basically deploy a Python application like we just did, right? So okay. So first of all, you need to have a code which you're basically going to deploy on your on the app engine that I basically just deployed on Google Cloud. Now this app engine basically is a server that has automatically been deployed in the backend, but I do not get access to this server. What I do get is basically a command line from where I can upload my code onto this app engine, and that's about it. My application will then be hosted. So what is the difference between this application that we have just launched versus the server that we deployed, right? So when we deployed the server, what we had to do was we had to configure the server from scratch, right? For example, in this, I have basically installed the Apache 2 software, and then I'm able to go to this IP address, and then I'm able to use the web server, or see the web server over here, or see the web page over here. But when you talk about the app engine, over here, I do not get access to the server just like this, right? What I do get is a dashboard kind of a thing, which is this. And in this dashboard, what I can do is I can deploy my code, which I have developed, right? just take the example of what I discussed in the starting, wherein let's say you're a developer and you want to deploy your app, right? So in this case, you will deploy your code directly. So we chose that we need a Python runtime. So the Python runtime automatically gets installed on whatever server Google Cloud is deploying in the backend, right? And that's about it. And now it says just give me your code and I run that code and your application will be ready. So I'm not dealing with a server over here. And hence this is a serverless service. Okay. Here we are not dealing with any servers. We will only be charged for the amount of traffic which is going to come on our website and the amount of processing that it is going to take to deal with that traffic. That's about it. We will not be charged for a server running irrespective of the fact whether we are using it or not. For example, even if this server is idle right now, I'm still being charged for it, right? But when you talk about App Engine, when I deploy an application, when it becomes accessible on the internet, only then I'll be charged, for App Engine. I will not be charged otherwise. So this is the App Engine service that you have in Google Cloud. Okay. Deepak is saying, what's the best resource to learn and practice example for Google Compute services? So I think, Deepak, if you're starting off, if you refer to the Google documentation, that should be enough for making you understand about the different Google Cloud services which are out there, right? But let's say if you want to understand how production architectures are deployed, then understand how it is basically used in production, then I think once you are clear with the basics, you will have to deep dive and understand about architecture. So Google Cloud has basically published a lot of white papers that you can go through. If that seems a lot to you, what you can also do is you can enroll into some professional courses, like Intellipaat also has a professional course to offer for Google Cloud. And in that case, what we do is we teach you from basics, and then we take you to a level where you become ready to give even job interviews, right? So either of the way, I think you are going to learn. It's just that if you are learning on your own, it will take a little bit more time and commitment from your end, right? But we, as an e-learning company, we understand that you, as professionals, do not get that much time to learn things on your own, and that's why we exist. So you can take our services, you can learn from us, and be ready with the GCP services in the shortest time possible. Okay. Couple is saying, which certification is suitable for a Java developer and where can I get tutorials? So I think Kapil, I've already answered where can I get tutorials. You can go through the documentations. Which certification is suitable for a Java developer? Well, Kapil, it all depends on what do you want to do in the future. Do you want to become an architect? Then architect certification is for you, right? If you want to become a developer itself in the future, then the developer certification is also there for you. It all depends. So if you want to become an architect, then I think your development background will help. But it does not mean that people who are non-developers, they cannot become an architect. So for others, if you aim to be an architect and you are not a developer right now, you still can do the architect certification. It's just that you will have to do a little bit more homework before applying for interviews, because some job profiles, they do not expect a development background, but some do. So you will have to pick and choose which interviews you can give. Okay, Deepak is saying, is there a way to view this recording later? So yes, Deepak, this will be available later for your viewing. I think this will be emailed to you by max tomorrow or day after. Kapil is saying, are the tutorials free to download? Kapil, so here is a tutorial that you can see on the screen, which is for deploying your Hello World application on App Engine. So you will find similar tutorials on the Google dashboard itself or Google documentation, so you can use them. Okay, so that's about it for the questions. So again, this was the App Engine, and this is the serverless concept that you are not dealing with the server, but what you're doing is you're deploying your application, and the cloud provider basically takes care of where your application has to be deployed, which kind of machine it has to be deployed on, based on the traffic that you're getting. Okay. Then the next kind of service that you have in the compute domain is basically the Kubernetes engine. So Kubernetes, I think is for people who already knows Kubernetes, because Kubernetes is also available for downloading or using on your local system as well, right? So Kubernetes is basically a container orchestration platform. Okay. If you do not know about Kubernetes, it is all fine. But people who use Kubernetes day in and day out, so Google Cloud has basically given you an option that you can basically use it on the cloud infrastructure without worrying about installing it, configuring it, etc. Right? And at the same time, you do not have to deal with commands. You can simply just use the UI to deploy your application. So that's the Kubernetes engine. Cloud functions are again serverless services, but in cloud functions, what happens is it's an event-driven, service, which basically means that let's say you want to do some image processing, okay, and image processing you do not want to do on your web server, which is basically hosting the traffic for you. You want to do it on a separate server so that even if the load is more for image processing, your traffic should not experience any lag. So in that case, what happens is cloud functions, you just put in the code for the image processing, and then your web server will basically just invoke cloud functions. It will do the processing for you and it will give you a response back. Okay, so that's what cloud functions are. It's basically used for serverless deployment of code when you have to do batch processing or when you have to deal with processing which you do not want to do on your web server. Then you have something called as Cloud Run. So Cloud Run again is a serverless service which is basically offered by Google Cloud. In case of Cloud Run, basically, if you're dealing with stateless machines or if you're dealing with stateless systems, which basically mean that you do not have the option of, storing user information or storing live user data, then you can make use of Cloud Run for hosting even stateless websites as well. Okay, so that's what Cloud Run is. And again, the beauty of Cloud Run is it is basically invoked based on the request being made, right? So when you talk about cloud functions, you do not deal with HTTP, HTTP based requests. You basically can deal with APIs, which are not on over the HTTP protocol, but basically it's event driven, like I said. So event driven in the sense that other Google Cloud services can call the cloud function to execute something and then respond back. But when you're dealing with cloud run services, it's based on HTTP. So even outside of the cloud, the Google Cloud paradigm, if you want to request for a website kind of a traffic, then cloud run service can be used to serve the request, and it's again serverless. Then you have something called as VMware engine. So some companies which have their applications on-prem are finding it difficult to migrate to cloud because of the sheer pre-migration steps that they have to do. Because if you are on a VMware machine, obviously the kernel or the operating system libraries are different, right? So when you want to deploy it on Google Cloud, you cannot simply just migrate that VM image directly to Google Cloud, right? And it can also be that you have a process in place where you have to work with vSphere or vCenter or other kind of VMware tools in order to deploy your servers. So if that is the scenario, Google Cloud also gives you the VMware engine, right? Where what you can do is you can deploy the whole VMware ecosystem on Google Cloud without even worrying about without even worrying about how I should train my workforce in order to use Google Cloud now. So your workforce can still work on the VMware ecosystem, but now your hardware will be hosted on Google Cloud instead of your on-prem system. So this is again a very fantastic service in the compute domain, right? So this was basically an overview of the compute domain of Google Cloud, guys. Next type of services that you have in the Google Cloud is for storage, which is again used a lot by people who basically are using Google Cloud. Right. So here again, you have services like Bigtable, you have services like Data Store, Firestore. So Bigtable is basically used for big data services. So whenever you have data in a NoSQL format, which is also at the scale of big data, right? In that case, you can basically store it in big table. Big table. Obviously, it'll be a little more expensive than other NoSQL data stores, but it will be able to give you the I/O required for a big data workload. So that is why big table, service is offered. Similarly, you have something called as data store. So data store is a normal NoSQL database that you get from Google Cloud, but this is not for big data workloads, right? And at the same time, it's a lot cheaper than what big table also offers, right? So if you have workloads which are not on the scale of big data, but you want to deal with NoSQL database, probably because you are using MongoDB now or some other NoSQL database, but you are migrating to cloud and you want a service which can serve your NoSQL needs, then you can choose data store, right? Similarly, there is an upgrade to data store and it's called Firestore now, right? And Firestore basically gives you a lot more features that were available in data store, but with the competitive price being the same, right? So the price is same, but you get a lot more features, you get better performance, and that's what Firestore services for you. It's again a NoSQL data store. Then you have something called as file store. So file store is basically a service which basically gives you a network drive which you can mount on multiple systems in the Google Cloud VMs. So let's say there's a VM that I've just deployed, right? So I have just deployed a VM and it has this particular volume attached to it, which is around 100 GB in space. Okay, so it's called the SDA disk, which has been attached to it, which is 100 GB in space. Now, what I can do is I can attach one more disk over here, which probably can be of any size that I specify, and I can use it for my storage needs. But the good point about that disk that I'm going to attach over here in this operating system is that it can be connected to multiple machines at the same time. So it's like having a shared drive between multiple machines across your infrastructure, and this shared drive can basically be read onto or written to by multiple systems again. Okay, so this is very useful service which basically is finding its ways in systems which are stateless, but let's say they want to share information between each other. So in that case, you can make use of shared drives like these, and then make that stateless system stateful by sharing the information between the servers. Okay, this is also useful in Kubernetes use cases. So if somebody is from Kubernetes or DevOps background, there's something called as persistent volumes in Kubernetes. So these persistent volumes can be mapped to a file store in Google Cloud Platform, right? And with that, what you understand is that you can have a persistent volume of any amount possible and also on a remote platform without relying on the server where that Kubernetes pod is running. And with that, it gives you the liberty of deploying it on any node of Kubernetes cluster without worrying whether the storage would be available there or not, right? Since the storage has now become remote. Okay. Then you have something called as a storage service. So storage service is just like, in Amazon, you have something called as S3, right? So similarly in GCP, you have storage, and this can be used to store objects or files on cloud, which can either be private or can be made publicly accessible. So it's just like Google Drive, but on Google Cloud, and with a lot more features such as versioning, such as getting a link which is publicly accessible, which can be used to download with. It also gives you unlimited storage. It also gives you a lot of tiering options. Do you want to download it? Correct. Right now, you can wait, and based on that, what you can do is you can also choose the pricing option. So let's say you have a lot of data to upload to cloud, but it's just backup. You might not even need it in any point in the future, right? But you still have to store it somewhere. So how you can save cost on this is you can basically save it in a tape type storage. And tape type storage is probably the cheapest storage available in the cloud market. So the price that you're going to get for an SSD storage and for a tape type storage is around the 10 times difference, right? So it will be 10 times more cheaper to basically store it on tape storage. The only drawback of this being that it will take a lot of time to retrieve from tape storage. Okay, so that is how the Google storage service comes in handy. Then if you are into relational databases, then you have the SQL service also. If you are into a distributed SQL service, then you have the Spanner service. If you want a cloud-based caching system, then you have Redis and Memcache also hosted on Google Cloud, and that's available in the memory store service. And then you have something called as data transfer as well. So let's say you have terabytes or petabytes of data which is sitting in your company, and since you're moving your infrastructure to cloud, what you also want to do is you want to transfer all that data to Google Cloud now. So when you're doing that, you can do it using the data transfer service. What they do is they send a device to your storage location which can store a lot of data. You store or you connect your servers with that device and you copy all that data on that device, and then that device is shipped back to the Google company. And what they do is then they upload it from there to their servers, and that's how you save a lot of time and at the same time cost of internet without sending your data over the internet, but the traditional way of storage by putting it on a device and shipping it to the company that you want to give it to. Okay, so that's what the data transfer service is. And you have multiple options over here. Let's say you are on any other cloud provider and now you want to shift to Google Cloud, right? So in that case, the transfer service is also available for a cloud provider as well. So let's say your data is on AWS or on Azure, and now you have decided to basically migrate to Google Cloud. So even that option is available over here for data transfer. Then you have something called as networking. We'll cover that once we address all the questions. So Ajay is saying, what is the difference between compute engine and Kubernetes engine? So Ajay, with compute engine, what you got was a server that you can access, right? Now on this server, what I can do is I can install the Kubernetes service, or I can install the Kubernetes software, and then I can use it. The other way to look at it is I can deploy a Kubernetes engine itself, and then I don't have to deal with this server, right? Then I can just deal with the Kubernetes software. So that's the difference between the two. Okay. Amit is saying serverless deployment is only possible with Google Cloud Platform, not with Azure and AWS. No, Amit. So even AWS and Azure has serverless services, but not in this much quantity. For example, Google Cloud has given a lot of variety in even serverless services as well. So that's not the case with AWS and Azure right now. Utkarsh is saying, which programming language is best for cloud computing? Well, Utkarsh, it just depends on the company that you're applying to. So there are a lot of, so if you talk about the popular languages these days, I think the most being used is Java, Python, and Golang. Even .NET is used a lot. So it all depends on which company you're applying to, right? For the programming language for you to learn. I think if you are starting out, if you don't know any programming language, I would suggest you go with Python because that is the most used in the industry right now. Sundar is saying, can I install SAP S4HANA in Google Cloud? Sundar, you can install anything you want on Google Cloud. Given it can install on your laptop, it can also get installed on the Google Cloud Platform service. Ravi is saying, professional cloud architect will cover all of discussed. Yes, all of this discussed and a lot more concepts as well are covered in the professional cloud architect certification. Okay, so those were the questions. Any more questions, guys? Please feel free to ask, and I would be happy to answer them. Okay, so now let's talk about the networking domain, right? So in networking, so as you have networks in your office, right? So what you do is you have network routers, you have switches, right? So all these devices are also available on Google Cloud to use, but they're all virtualized, right? And you don't have to deal with configuring them manually. All of them comes pre-configured. You get a UI kind of a view. And with this UI, you can configure. So for example, let's say you want multiple IP addresses, public IP addresses. It's just a way at a click of a button. If you want to have a firewall for your servers that you want to configure, firewall is all ready to use. You just have to set in the rules, right? If you want to define routes, if you want to connect two networks, if you want to uh, mirror the traffic which is going on a network onto some other stream, that is also possible. So all of this is possible in the networking domain or in the VPC network service. The fact being that if this were had to be done in office premises without you making use of any cloud platform, you will have to had buy a lot of devices to make this particular thing possible, and a network administrator as well who can set all this up before you can actually put in the rules. But with this, you don't have to do that now because all those devices are pre-configured. All you have to do is set in the rules and set in the behavior that you want for your network, right? Then you have other network services such as the most important being load balancing, DNS and CDN, right? So these are all services that are again part of the network domain. Load balancing meaning that let's say you have a fleet of servers that you are dealing with. Let's say you have 25 or 30 servers which are catering to 1,500 people. For example, let's say you and I, we are making use of, let's say google.com, right? So the google.com website that we see is obviously hosted by a server. And it will be very non-technical to think that, the whole website of Google is hosted on one server. It's hosted on multiple servers across the world, right? And you can land up on any server without your knowing. How is that possible? That's possible using load balancing. So you hit one URL, you hit google.com, and from that URL, you're basically routed, across multiple servers to a specific server. And that is possible using load balancer. So load balancing job is to distribute the traffic among multiple servers based on the kind of request which is being made. Then you have something called as cloud DNS. So cloud DNS basically means that let's say if you have, let's say google.com, it's a domain name. So that domain name is basically pointing to an IP address. And that IP address is basically mapped to the domain name in the domain name service. So this cloud DNS basically helps you to map your domain with an IP address or a load balancer using the cloud DNS service. So that's what it's all about. Then you have something called a CDN. CDN basically is again, used to serve your data faster to a particular audience, irrespective of which part of the world they are living in, right? So that is the CDN service. So more details, I think we can discuss at some other point in time. But then also you have something called as NAT, you have traffic directory, you have service directory. So all these are networking services that you can explore in Google Cloud. Hybrid connectivity talks about, you're not just having the cloud infrastructure, but also having some servers on-prem. And if you want connectivity between these two, separate clusters, so one on being cloud and one in your office, if you want all these offices or all these systems to be on the same network, then you can make use something called as VPN, right, which is a virtual private network. So what this does is it basically connects all your server fleet in the cloud to the server fleet which you have in your office premises, right? Then you have network service tiers, which basically gives you different performance tiers in network. So let's say you want an absolutely great bandwidth between your servers. You want it in GBs, right? So there will be a separate pricing for that. If you do not want that much high bandwidth, I think if your work can be done even in MBs, then you can choose that service tier. So it all depends on which service tier you choose, and according to that, you will be charged. So that's what network service tiers is all about. Then you can also talk about, something better than firewalls, such as you can also talk about SSL certificates, policies. You can also talk about a high-level firewall, which is Cloud Armor, which you can again explore in Google Cloud's network security domain. The network intelligence is all about monitoring. It's all about your performance of the network, which again is basically visible or is made visible in the network intelligence service domain. So guys, these were some of the core infrastructure services of cloud. Now, obviously, this is not going to help you out just by attending this session. You will again have to explore more about these, right? So these are very wide variety of services, and each service has a lot of things to learn about in, which is all covered as part of the cloud architect certification, right? So this should be a stepping stone. This session should be a stepping stone for you to learn cloud more in detail as you move along. Okay. So any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer. If not, let's go towards the conclusion of the session. Okay. So Utkarsh is saying why. So why in every website domain name is required while we have made by own and it's require payment also. So Utkarsh, when you buy a domain name, that domain name basically requires a price or a price tag is attached to it. The reason for that is that domain name is going to be exclusively for you. Nobody else in the world can register that domain name for themselves. Okay, and that is what the payment is for. Other than that, yes, the domain name servers and everything is going to be handled by you. But because of that exclusivity that is given to you, for example, if you talk about google.com, nobody else can buy google.com now because it's blocked by a company called Google. Okay. So because of that, pricing is basically involved because that medium through which you're buying or purchasing that domain has to pay it to a domain registration authority, which is basically which governs the whole internet. Okay, so that's why you are basically charged for it. All right, now let's talk about something that might interest you. So let me go to Intellipaat.com. So if let's say if you are in on the lookout of buying a professional course, just head over to Intellipaat.com. We have a lot of courses that we offer. We also offer Google Cloud. Just search for this, and you will get the course for the Cloud Architect certification, which is this. Okay. So if you want to look out as to what you want to learn in Google Cloud, just go through the course content that is mentioned on our website, and that would give you a rough idea about what has to be learned in order to crack this certification. Okay. So these are all the things that you have to learn in Google Cloud in order to crack the certification. Now, if you think this is too much for you and if you want help, you can always enroll into our course and we would be happy to help. We also have a lot of blogs that you can refer to. So you can go to intellipaat.com/blog, and this should basically help you in reading all about the different type of clouds which are out there and about them. So just go to the cloud computing section, and this will talk about the different type of cloud platforms, the most popular cloud platforms which are out there, and how you can learn them. So, and also one more treat for you guys. So if you are interested, there's a promo code called YouTube 30. So let me type it out for you. So the promo code is YouTube 30. If you type in this promo code, you'll get a flat 30% off on whichever course you're enrolling for with Intellipaat. Right. So I'll also give it to you on the chat. So if you're interested, you can make use of this for upgrading your career. Okay. So with that said, guys, I thank you all for joining in today. I hope this session was useful to you. And if you want to reach out to us, you can always call us on these numbers, or if these numbers do not work for you, you can also call us on these numbers which are mentioned on the website. Okay. And with this, we will be happy to connect with you. Even if you have doubts, you're not interested to buy the course, you can call us and we can in general reply to your queries too. And that would be it from my side, guys. So I thank you all for joining in today. I hope today's session was useful. And if it was, please leave the feedback after this session, and that will really help us out. Okay. So thank you, guys. Have a great day ahead, and goodbye.